So I was watching the Young Turks, as I often do, just for you guys out there in the audience, when I stumbled across this video. This video where it was about conservatives being attacked by a BLM Antifa type, and the Young Turks somehow turned this into a conservatives bad and an orange man bad video. And I was going to say, after watching this video through multiple times, that this, above all others, is the most hypocritical the Young Turks have ever been. But then I remembered Stephen Michael Davis has a series called Why People Hate the Young Turks, and in part one of the series, he had something that beat even this example. By the way, Stephen Michael Davis, almost at 10,000 subscribers. Come on, with all you guys who come and watch my videos, after all the times I promoted him, you can't get him to 10K for Christmas. Where is your Christmas spirit? And if you needed another incentive, I'm going to go over this amazing example that was found in his video. Now, back during the 2016 primaries, there was an incident where a Bernie Sanders surrogate at a rally for Bernie Sanders used colorful language that could be interpreted as sexist against Hillary Clinton. He ended up calling Clinton and the Democrats that take money from corporations whores.
A great example of this was when progressive activist Paul Weiss Song used the term corporate whores at a Bernie rally in Brooklyn. Song was clearly using the term to rail against corruption, and the panel at TYT defended him.
You know, when you look at it, you think, okay, he's telling people what he thinks. I mean, I don't think you should tamp down on people's language. If you're upset, you got to curse sometimes.
And he's not trying to be a sexist. He's not calling Hillary a whore. He's calling the corporate Democrats, which there are a bunch, are whores.
Here's why he said it. Not because he wants to call Hillary Clinton a whore, but because he had a crowd of 27,000 people in front of him. He knows they're Bernie Sanders supporters, and he desperately wants them to think that he's awesome.
Now, we all know, even though this was interpreted by the media, who is definitely in the tank for Hillary Clinton, as a gendered insult, that this is something that people throw at their political opponents all the time when they try to make the claim that corporate money is making them change their position. So this is something that I would classify as an unfair attack.
And so he threw around the bombastic sort of language that he has seen Bernie Sanders use, if not that actual term.
And the Young Turks 100% agreed.
What you're doing
sickening.
is you're delegitimizing sexism and misogyny and racism just to support a corrupt politician.
Again, this is fair analysis from the Young Turks, and it's also fair for them to call out people in the media who are looking to defend Hillary Clinton by any means necessary for using this line of attack against Bernie Sanders, especially when it's not warranted.
When everything is sexism, then nothing is sex. And that's what the right wing does. They all political correct. They call everything, so now everything is blah, blah.
This is the opposite version of that.
You agree, I agree, and everybody on the TYT panel agrees, proving the point that a broken clock is right twice a day. However, Stephen Michael Davis, a little bit smarter than the average person, he actually stayed tuned for the next segment, and this, I kid you not, is the very next segment that the Young Turks ran after talking about how it's inappropriate to throw around allegations of sexism for political advantages.
But let's turn on to something, let's move from the sexism to a little bit of perhaps subtle racism here, but feel free to disagree. This week, Donald Trump is making his case to New York voters, giving speeches which consist, as they usually do, of long portions that attack people that he's not even running against. And Mitt Romney made a few appearances in his speech, as he always does. But in attacking Mitt Romney, look at the way that he chose to do it. And as you watch this video, bear in mind that he's in New York when he's delivering these remarks.
We've had Obama far too long. The last election should have been won, except Romney choked like a dog. He choked. He went, I can't breathe. I can't breathe, he said.
Nothing.
Did you notice the evil bad racism in the statements that evil bad orange man said about Mitt Romney there? Well, I didn't either, but the Young Turks sure noticed the racism. Look at how they're going to interpret what Donald Trump said about Mitt Romney.
You don't think so? Okay, so the claim that is being made and that I will make is, I said before the show, I've seen people talk about people choking hundreds of times over the course of my life. Like Kobe choked and everybody choked. Not last night, he did well. But people always choke. They say that. They're not so committed to the metaphor that they then talk about not being able to breathe. I've never seen that happen. And in New York, where Eric Garner was choked to death by the police and famously had the last words, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. I don't understand what would lead Donald Trump to think that in a completely unrelated context, making fun of that is a good idea. but I can't imagine why anyone would say that for any other reason in New York.
I kid you not, these segments were back to back on their network, one after another. They had just finished explaining to you how it was unfair for people in the media to call Bernie a sexist when one of his surrogates at one of his rallies called Hillary Clinton a hooah. But all of a sudden, when it comes to Donald Trump saying choked like a dog, this equals a dog whistle about Eric Garner.
I'm with you on this, John.
Oh, really? I thought that I would be 1 out of 3.
No, I'm with you on it. I mean, whenever you say someone choke, you're like, you don't say, I can't breathe.
I can't breathe.
I
can't breathe.
Since this guy has a history of dog whistles and racist statements, it makes me think he did it in a way that he can go, no, I didn't mean anything by it, when he definitely meant something by it.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to the Young Turks, it's only 2 out of the 3 people on this panel that buy into this ridiculous idea that Trump was secretly dog whistling about Eric Garner while attacking Mitt Romney because he was giving this attack on Mitt Romney while he was in New York, Jimmy Dore being the rare exception and the rarer voice of reason on this panel because Jimmy Dore is actually more far left than the people at the Young Turks, but credit where credit is due in this one. But this is a perfect example of how hypocritical the Young Turks would be. You have a clear and obvious instance where a Democrat or a progressive that they like uses language that could easily be misinterpreted into a sexist way. Now, I happen to agree with them that the Clinton campaign and the media were overplaying their hand in this instance, but I understand the leap because that is a derogatory term for women and it's often used as a gendered insult. But then you take something that's even further of a stretch for Donald Trump, and since the Young Turks don't like Trump, all of a sudden they're like backwards justifying, adding in context that clearly wasn't there, ignoring context that was there in order to make the case that Donald Trump was racistly dog whistling while attacking Mitt Romney, something that makes absolutely no sense.
He uses the expression choked like a dog, and I have no idea what that means.
Also, the choke like a dog comment, even though that sounds a little weird, it's not when you really think about it. What Trump is referring to is dog choke collars. When you have a big dog and you put one of these metal collars around them and you yank the collar in order to direct the dog. So when Romney choked like a dog in a debate with Obama, what Trump was actually saying was that Obama was holding the leash and he was walking Romney around every which way during the debate, and that's why Romney lost. Is it a goofy simile for Trump to use for the Romney-Obama race? Sure, 100%, but Trump's over 70 years old, so goofy expressions are something to be expected, and you don't have to reach for some kind of dog whistle to make this racist, but the Young Turks do that because they like Bernie Sanders, they liked his campaign, and they hate Trump and can't stand him, so they interpret everything in the most positive way possible for Bernie, but the worst way possible for Trump. Now, with that groundwork laid about how hypocritical the Young Turks are, we're going to get into this video about Trump supporters supposedly rioting in Washington, D.C. Now, I need to tell you up front that the basis for this news story is a Black Lives Matter Antifa type stabbing 4 people that are connected to and or are members of the Proud Boys. So this is a story of a left-winger stabbing 4 people on video, and the Young Turks title it Trump Riots.
So during planned protests in D.C. over the weekend, President Trump supporters quickly shifted from their objective of complaining about his election loss to attacking counter-protesters and scribbling obscenities on their butts. And we may not see that part, but they did do it.
I'm amused at J.R. Jackson talking about the Proud Boys writing obscenities on their butts as if that's a big problem in this country, when we've had Antifa and BLM types breaking windows, burning stuff down, and writing graffiti on other people's property. The real thing we should be concerned about is this goofy way the Proud Boys decided to write a message on their own bodies.
Let's go straight into the graphics about what happened this weekend. Authorities in Washington, D.C. said that on Sunday, they had arrested a man in connection with the stabbing of 4 people on Saturday night as supporters and opponents of President Trump clashed blocks from the White House. They continued. The 4 were stabbed outside a bar at 11th and F Streets Northwest around 9 on Saturday. The police said Washington resident Philip Johnson, who's 29 years old, was arrested and charged with assault with a dangerous weapon, said the police spokesperson. They said he used a knife. Lastly, the confrontation occurred after dozens of supporters of Mr. Trump, many of whom appeared to be members of the Proud Boys, gathered on the street outside of Harry's bar. Some of the Trump supporters shouted and pointed at a black man in dark clothes who was alone and standing against a wall. This is according to a journalist who witnessed the confrontation. So this was also, the video of this was posted of the man standing there.
Now, unfortunately, here on this channel, unlike the Young Turks, I actually have to follow YouTube's terms of service in order to keep this platform alive. So I actually can't show you the video that the Young Turks are showing in their video, because not only will I get demonetized for doing so, but this video will be age restricted, even though the Young Turks probably have neither restriction on their own video. So in order to prevent myself from getting a strike on this channel, I have to restrict myself to showing parts of the video where there is no violence, and restrict myself to stills where there also is no violence going on. Because again, YouTube will not treat me showing this in a newsworthy way anywhere fairly compared to the Young Turks.
And then we're running this underneath us because there was constant obscenities.
Now, with that being said, the most important, the most crucial part of this video is right here, where 29-year-old Philip Johnson, Black Lives Matter and Antifa type, there specifically to disrupt the Trump supporters that are having their little protests, pulls out a knife in a threatening manner against those Trump protesters. Now, prior to this man, Philip Johnson, knowing that he has a concealed knife in hand, moves towards where the Trump supporters are. They're all gathered around this bar, and he begins shouting obscenities at them and threatening them, which causes them to come over. This is him provoking the fight, by the way, if you're not following what I'm trying to say. So the Proud Boys come over, and then he pulls out the knife in a threatening manner. And in an incredibly stupid maneuver by the Trump supporters, by the right-wing people, they decide to attack him even though he's holding a knife and threatening them with the knife, which causes 4 people to get stabbed. Again, check the Young Turks video for yourselves, watch this go down, watch how they describe it versus how I described it, and see who's telling the truth. Since I'm not using the video in my own video because of terms of service reasons, I'm actually giving you a more generous interpretation on behalf of Philip Johnson than the video actually shows.
Police officer jumps in, there he is in front of your screen, trying to break up what's going on. Insinuates that he's going to spray someone with pepper spray, but I don't think it really went. And then the fight continues, and eventually he breaks it up. He was the suspect, I think, was Mr. Johnson, was bruised, battered, bloodied, and they did arrest him. And they're not sure what happened after that, if he's posted bail or if he has an attorney or any of that. But they did say 4 people in that instance were stabbed in that altercation, and then the flames and fury just exploded from there. So this is what we're getting in the middle of DC streets. While again, I'm not sure what President Trump has been saying regarding this.
So JR, of course, tries to make this an orange man bad thing. Again, it is amazing how Trump supporters can come out to an event, not destroy anything, not burn anything. Somebody comes at them with a knife, stabs 4 of them, and it's still a Trump problem. And if you weren't sure, that's what J.R. Jackson was doing. Listen to him talk about these people that are bringing knives and what Trump thinks about that.
Or if he's proud of the Proud Boys, or if he's proud of this fight that's happened, or even of some of these other members that decide to show up with knives, and then we're in the middle of a fight, in the middle of the street. This is what we've devolved to.
Obviously, President Trump is not supportive of, nor is he encouraging left-wing people, BLM Antifa types, to bring knives and stab multiple Trump supporters in these instances. And by the way, not mentioned in the Young Turks video at all, which I find incredibly interesting, because they talk about how Kyle Rittenhouse's weapon was illegal on a technicality, in that he was just a few months too young to be open carrying it in Wisconsin, a misdemeanor, is the fact that knives like this, the one featured in this video, are illegal according to DC law. Look it up. You can't have a knife over 3 inches. It's never going to get mentioned in this video, so I figured I'd mention the illegal weapon that the Young Turks seem to be so obsessed with when it's a technicality that actually might fall under an exemption, but won't mention when the law is clear-cut and unambiguous.
This story has a couple of different components. First of all, don't bring any weapons to any protest. Don't do it if you're right-wing, don't do it if you're left-wing. And I think that having the knife there made it worse.
Yes, Cenk, having the knife there made it worse, considering pulling the knife is what led to the altercation and 4 different people got stabbed.
Now, having said that, this is the clearest case of self-defense that has ever been presented. And I'm sure the people who gave $2 million to get Kyle Rittenhouse out on bail are busily giving the same amount of money to Mr. Johnson.
Cenk, this is so ridiculous, I even thought it would be beyond you. This person went there with the knife. He gets into a verbal altercation with these people, then pulls out the knife that he had been concealing, and then, because people are being threatened with the knife, they attack him, which is a natural human response. You ever heard of fight or flight? They decided to go with fight. By the way, I think they should have fled when this guy pulled out a knife, because obviously he intended to start trouble and start stabbing people, which is what he did. This is not self-defense in any way, shape, or form. I know that you're going to conflate this with Kyle Rittenhouse, but I'm going to explain the difference between Rittenhouse incredibly clearly, as if the videos on their own don't explain the difference. But this is not a self-defense case, not legally, not morally, based on the actions that led up to the instance.
By the way, cops, you were right there. We saw you at the end of the tape, and they're all politely asking. The guys get stomped on and has a knife. Everybody's in danger, right? Get in there quicker. This is the one time we would like you to get in there quicker before they have the guy. What if they'd stomp his skull, right? And he dies there, right there on the spot.
This is why the police never win when it comes to the media, because if the police use a sufficient show of force, and that show of force ends up deterring rioting and deterring violence, then they will be criticized for using too much force that was disproportionate to the event that they were at. However, if they are not forceful in specific instances, all of a sudden the police pull back and they let the violence happen. There's never any way for the police to win in any of these scenarios, because we can never see the alternative had they not been there, or had they used more force, what would have ended up happening.
You're gonna let them mob him and try to lynch him first?
So this guy shows up specifically to antagonize these people. He starts the argument that leads to the altercation. He pulls out an illegal knife in a threatening manner, and then he stabs 4 people. And during this time, the right-wingers that he's going against are trying to get the knife away from him, get him to the ground, and bring him to the police at the same time so that he can be arrested. But according to Cenk, the police are letting the right-wing people lynch this guy that, again, stabbed 4 people, one of them in critical condition at the time of me recording this video.
And so for folks who said Rittenhouse was self-defense, when Rittenhouse brought a much more serious weapon and started the fight, shot and killed people before anyone tried to take his weapon away. In this case, there's no question the Proud Boys start the fight, and then they gang up on him, and he's in clear mortal danger at that point.
How stupid does Cenk think his audience is? I mean, they have to be pretty stupid if this like to dislike video on this blatantly false information that Cenk is spreading is any indication of their intelligence. But for him to say that Rittenhouse started the fight when, according to all reports, even the Washington Post, not your right-wing Trump MAGA source, the fight was initiated by Rosenbaum after Rittenhouse put out a dumpster fire, is insane. For him to say that Rittenhouse started attacking people, started shooting them, before any of them went for his gun, when the witnesses, and actually the charging document against Rittenhouse says the opposite, is blatantly false and unbelievable. Rittenhouse did not start the fight. It is on video 100%. This guy did start the fight, and Cenk is just flipping it based on his ideological bend while calling you a hypocrite.
If you don't think this is self-defense, you're a liar.
Cenk, you are a liar. You are lying right now. The videos 100% contradict what you're saying, and it is insane that your channel is promoted by YouTube while people calling you out get suppressed.
Police officers were injured throughout the protest. There was both Proud Boys and folks from opposing sides.
You know, it is amazing, and I mean absolutely amazing, that a bunch of Trump supporters can come out to an event. And by the way, they were a broad selection of Trump supporters because they ended up supporting him and they were out there to protest him losing the election to Biden, because a lot of them think that the election didn't go fairly. That's why they were there. But they can be boiled down into just the Proud Boys, the group that has a really negative connotation around them. The Poor Boys, if you want to be Joe Biden, standing ready and standing by and standing back, or whatever. But those can be just boiled down to one single group's name. However, when we clearly see Antifa and BLM, they're holding Antifa and BLM signs, they're dressed in all black, which is what Antifa wears when they come out to these events. You know, it's an organization, they have the same colors, same patterns and all that. they get called unnamed counter-protesters because you can't even acknowledge the existence of the left-wing rioters in any meaningful way, even when you're covering the story, and not doing so means your audience is less informed.
Because we're in the middle of this whole clash of people, but when you get these clashes and someone's sitting there face to face.
Again, another pattern I noticed and I think you should be aware of. If a right-wing person does something wrong, the headline will say, right-wing person of whatever group did this thing wrong. But when left-wingers commit violence or riot or whatever, they become unnamed protest groups and we talk about clashes. All of a sudden they were clashing. The Trump supporters ended up clashing with other people because it doesn't really communicate who started the violence or who was the initiator of the violence, but it tells you the name of Trump supporters and then you don't really think about who they're actually clashing with. Totally deceptive, totally dishonest. But again, we've seen this for years in this country.
So let me give you guys a juxtaposition because JR reminded me of it. So here, I watched the whole tape. The cops are incredibly polite to the Proud Boys as they're in the middle of beating someone potentially to death.
Again, watch the video. The police were trying to break this up and they did end up ultimately breaking this up. They threatened the people with pepper spray if they did not stop engaging in the fight. Cenk just making things up 100%. But you gotta hear this analogy because it's absolutely amazing and I don't think you're gonna realize how stupid it is until I explain it. Like, you'll get 75% of it, but then I'm gonna explain how even more stupid than that 75% this actually is.
And they hear there's a knife, they clearly hear it, but they don't know who has the knife at that point. So for all they know, it's the guys that are beating him down and shivving him right there on the spot. And they're like, guys, could you please move? Could you please move? Jacob Blake was going into his car with his 3 kids in it, and they thought the car might have a knife, and cops shot him in the back 7 times. Now you got white fascists that are beating down a black guy, and all of a sudden the cops are super polite. They're the politest I've ever seen them.
So let's break this down and how stupid it is on every possible level. First of all, Jacob Blake, it wasn't a mystery what the threat was in that situation. He just got finished fighting off the police officers and taking a taser before moving around the car with purpose and getting inside it. Now, whether or not the cops were worried about him grabbing a weapon or him getting in the car and taking off with children, who were not his, by the way, in the car, is neither here nor there. He was clearly the threat and they had justification to shoot him in that scenario. Also, the police were called specifically on Jacob Blake for violating a restraining order against a woman who accused him of assaulting her while she was in bed with her son. This guy was clear and obviously a threat. He was on a felony warrant and he was getting into that car. And if you're a police officer, you cannot let this person get into that car and take off with children that are not his.
Oh, you're about to kill someone. Oh, could you please move? I might or might not use my pepper spray, only a little bit. I don't want to offend right-wing fascists. Oh, if you were black, I'd shoot all of you in the back. So let's, because it happened. It already happened. This is not a hypothetical.
Number 2, there were no white fascists and the cops were not gingerly with those white fascists. This is what the cops had to sort out in about a split second. According to Cenk, the difference between the cops not shooting randomly at people when they heard about a potential knife and shooting Jacob Blake is race. But you try to figure out who Cenk wants you to shoot in this scenario. How ignorant or how stupid does Cenk think his audience is that they won't be able to tell the difference between these two scenarios? That they can't tell the difference between a crowd of people arriving on the police's doorstep in the middle of the night and being called directly in the middle of the day to deal with a specific person.
Oh, you're about to kill someone. Oh, could you please move? I might or might not use my pepper spray, only a little bit. I don't want to offend right-wing fascists. Oh, if you were black, I'd shoot all of you in the back.
The idea that the only difference in these two situations is the skin color is absolutely absurd. And this is made even more absurd by the fact that the guy who had the knife in this scenario was also a black person who the police did not shoot. Remember, the police said that there was a knife on the floorboards of the car that Jacob Blake was reaching into, meaning that Jacob Blake either had the knife in his hand and dropped it when he was being shot, or he was reaching for the knife. Either way, it was a black person, maybe going for a knife, maybe already having a knife. In this scenario, it is indisputable that the black guy did have the knife. So what Cenk is actually saying when he says, look how white people are getting treated versus how black people are getting treated, is this black guy was shot in Wisconsin in a completely different scenario, maybe involving a knife, while this black guy, who definitely did have a knife, wasn't shot in this completely different scenario. Therefore, the police are racist because they didn't shoot any of the white people who didn't have a knife, who were being stabbed by the black guy with the knife. Therefore, the police support white fascism. Yeah, Cenk, you might want to workshop that one a little bit. You might want to think that through, because what you're actually saying is that different circumstances dictate different treatment from the police. And when they know of a threat and they are responding to that known threat, that's a little bit different than blindly firing into a mob of people when they're going after somebody who has the knife. Cenk, it didn't happen. The black guy, Philip Johnson, was not shot in the back, even though he was stabbing people, and he stabbed 4 people. You keep talking about how this black guy's life was in danger because he had a few bruises on him. What about the people with knife wounds due to the fact that he was stabbing them with a knife?
So let's, because it didn't happen. It already happened. This is not a hypothetical.
It's not a hypothetical. It already happened. Cenk, again, no right-wing fascists are running in the street. The only fascists I saw were the race-based fascists that belong to Antifa and BLM. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no standards at all. You lie in the face of video that you show on your own show, and it's embarrassing. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media accounts. They're linked in the description. Support me via the support links. Till next time.